That's funny.
Thanks, Caleb, for handling all the Zoom details.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin. Okay. Great. Just at the top of the hour, 3 o'clock. We are waiting for task force members to arrive. Thank you for being here on this glorious Wednesday afternoon, halfway through the week almost. I think Lola knows that she has a BATH on schedule, which is why she just decided to take herself for a dip and a roll in the mud. I was just discussing with her this morning that a BATH is important. Yeah. For someone who loves swimming, she really does not like baths. She goes and hides in the corner. It's like, why do you hate me, Mom?
I think that my kids would definitely understand the difference between a bath and
They,
swimming. They are not the same.
but I mean, it's a dog.
No, one
Well,
would
it's my
think.
dog child. Like I'm like, you love the water. She loves the hose. She loves the sprinklers. I'm like, it's the same thing as running through the sprinklers just with soap.
I think it's the soap. See it?
Probably the
That's
soap.
the issue.
Like, oh, I smell horrible after she gets soap. Good afternoon, Thea.
Oh, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm well. I'm tired.
Yeah, busy week already.
Busy week. Very busy week.
Indeed.
Hmm.
Well, we're a couple minutes past 3. I'm hoping that we get Doria and Lawrence. Irene is no longer able to join us, so it would be the 3 of you.
I saw a note in the meeting invite Lawrence couldn't join until 4. Is that still the case?
It was unclear about 2 weeks ago when we scheduled this. He was trying to adjust
Oh,
his.
okay.
Oh, here
Oh,
we go.
here he is.
Perfect. Hey, Lawrence.
Hello,
How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing pretty well. So should we just launch into the front end business and hopefully we get Doria to join in the next couple minutes? Okay, I think I will interpret that as a yes. Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is a meeting of the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force Restorative Land Subcommittee. This is part 2 of discussions that were initiated a couple weeks ago. I believe it was September 5th or September 4th, one of the two. So thank you for being here. My name is Megan Wiley. I provide facilitation support to the task force, and we have additional staff support with us today from the California Strategic Growth Council, Camille Frazier, Tessa Salzman, and Caleb Swanson in the meeting room. We'll be taking notes and producing a meeting summary as always, and materials will be posted to the project website, and we will develop a meeting summary from today's discussion as well. And before we launch, we always start by sharing that the task force was established in the California Budget Act of 2022 via AB 179. They're a 13-member independent body directed to submit a report by January 1st, 2026 to the Legislature and Governor that includes a set of policy recommendations on how to address the agricultural land equity crisis. We've been working on this report collaboratively for the better part of 2 years, following many meetings, site visits, guest speakers, presentations, and community engagement sessions across California. So we are approaching the finish line. We have a couple months left. our participation guidelines across all task force meetings, whether they're in person or online, and they apply to everyone joining, whether it's a task force member, staff member, or member of the public, are these participation guidelines right here. Shorthand for we all work together and create a space wherein we respect diverse perspectives, encourage inclusive participation, and we all agree to use courteous language. That means no ascribing motives or judgments to people's commentary, using polite energy, tone, and language in your comments, and please remain on topic. So today's conversation space again is restorative land. We have several opportunities for public comments. You are welcome to share a comment at each of these moments. They are associated with the agenda topics, which I'll fly through in a second. And you can do that by completing a form at this website here, or you can use your raise hand feature in Zoom, and that way we'll know that you want to hop into the conversation queue and share your comment. We do ask that folks adhere to a 2-minute time limit in order to make space for everyone who does want to share. You can find your raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar, either under a hand icon, a heart icon, or a smiley face reactions icon. And staff will help with the muting, unmuting portion. Cameras are optional. Always nice to see smiles. Our plan for this afternoon, we have 2 hours reserved. We might not need all of that time. Our first order of business is to approve the summary from the September 5th meeting. And then we pivot to a working session, which is continued conversations that we started on September 5th. So we'll get some context for the discussion and then continue to think through the proposed revisions and proposed ideas for refinement and potential inclusion in the draft report, again, related to restorative land. Before we close out, review action items and follow-up tasks and deadlines. Hear public comment related to the working session. And then there's a general public comment period at the end where folks are welcome to comment on anything related to task force business in general beyond just restorative land. So let's take a quick roll call to establish quorum. When I say your name, please unmute and say present or here or hello. Member Thea Rittenhouse.
Present here. Hello.
All three. Member Lawrence Harlan.
Here.
Wonderful. So we're at 50% of a 4-member subcommittee. I think that counts as quorum. We're hoping that we get member Doria Robinson here in a bit, but member Irene de Baracua will be unable to join us this afternoon. A last-minute change in that schedule.
One quick note, Megan, we also heard from Doria that she will be unable to join us.
Oh, bummer. Okay. So Lawrence and Thea, the two of you, we will take some guidance. I'm not sure if that kind of changes the shape of the conversation a little bit. It clearly won't be as robust with just half of the members. But we've got about, I don't know, 8 slides or so, maybe 6 to 8 slides with content. We did want to get some feedback at minimum on those and at least gather some questions or areas of input from you all. But of course, we want to take your lead on how deep you want to go into that conversation, being that it's 2 members of the subcommittee today. And I suppose my first question is approval of the meeting summary. Would you like to take action to approve the meeting summary from September 5th, or would you like to table this action?
Oh, well, I read through it and I'm okay to approve it, Lawrence, if you are, or table it if you haven't had a chance.
I'm okay to approve it.
Splendid. Any proposed edits? Do you want me to pull it up on screen?
I did not have any proposed edits.
No edits from you, Lawrence? Okay. Let's be formal about it. Do I hear a motion to approve the summary as written?
I motion to approve the meeting summary.
Thank you. And is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any public comment or on the draft meeting summary? Okay, seeing none, motion and a second to approve the meeting summary as written. If you are in agreement, please say aye or nay or oppose or abstain. Member Rittenhouse,
Aye.
Member Harlan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting summary is approved. Fantastic. We will remove the draft watermark and finalize it and post it to the website and distribute. Thank you. Okay, working session. So Camille's going to lead us through this and take it away.
Thanks, Megan. And Thea and Lawrence, as Megan mentioned, if there are topics here that you're feeling like there's some input you could provide just to help staff kind of move this forward to the October meeting, that would be fantastic. But we also understand if there are things that you'd actually prefer to hold on or to, some other way have that conversation with your task force members. I do encourage, if you're both comfortable with it, it'd be great if we can move through this content and get your initial input and response, just because it will make it that much easier in October for the full task force to have a kind of more robust understanding of what the subcommittee has been up to, and then be able to review that language. So if that sounds okay to you both, I'm gonna jump in, and of course you can just let me know whether this is feeling like the right way to approach the material, if that sounds all right.
Good, Camille. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so Megan, if you'll please advance. So to start out, there's actually a few context slides that lead up to the discussion slides, and this is related to some research requests or some requests for information that the subcommittee had at the last meeting, and the way that staff have moved that forward. So one quick thing for you to hold in mind, and this would be one area that we would really welcome, Thea and Lawrence, your input. One of the requests the subcommittee had was to learn more about the reparations task force, and particularly to understand sort of the legal guidance that task force received in relation to eligibility, but then also just a broader understanding of how this task force, the Agricultural Land Equity Task Force, could build on a platform that was established by Reparations Task Force. So to that end, we got Marissa Raya's help, who was in our advisory committee member, who was in our last meeting. And she connected us with Don Tamaki, who was a member of the Reparations Task Force, is still part of advocacy around those recommendations, and is a lawyer who's active in this space. So we have a meeting set up with Don. He was unable to make this meeting, but that's set up, I believe, tomorrow, if I'm not misspeaking. So we would really value hearing from you both if there are any specific kinds of questions or feedback you're hoping to learn from that opportunity to connect with someone who's very familiar with the Reparations Task Force. The two issues that staff have that are top of mind are how did the Reparations Task Force approach the issue of eligibility? And there's actually a few other pieces of context that might help to build that out for us all today. And then also, what is Don's understanding of how this particular issue, agricultural land, relates to what the Reparations Task Force had done and ongoing advocacy in that space. So those are kind of the frames that we were thinking we would discuss with Don. I'm wondering, Thea or Lawrence, if those map onto what you would like to learn, and if there are any other things you'd like staff to make sure that we share or that we ask about in that opportunity to meet.
This is great, Camille. I think that's those are definitely questions that I would have. I also think, particularly as Mr. Tamaki was on the Reparations Task Force, the perspective on Prop 209, and how that, because I've heard conflicting things about how that maybe increases the eligibility, or is not a fact, it doesn't conflict with Prop 209 regarding eligibility for persons formerly enslaved persons. So yeah, I think Marisa also touched on that briefly, but just to have more detail on that piece, that would be my only other question. I think that eligibility will be top of mind for state agencies. If there was any research that was done any, I think Marisa mentioned that there were some things set up, and there was some research into how that would happen. And I think from what I saw from how you wrote out our goal, that also is kind of addressed in there too. So I think that's definitely priority for me too, to understand the eligibility piece.
Thanks, Thea. Yeah, that's helpful. Understanding eligibility as it relates to some of these other challenges or sort of existing legal frameworks that the state navigates, like Prop 209. So that's helpful to frame it that way.
Right. And I just, I know we brought this up at our last meeting too, but that there was a bill that was introduced in the last session that was going to mandate state agencies include this type of language rather than socially disadvantaged or other definitions. And so I think that will be important to note for this goal, and maybe we can get into that later. But there will, because state agencies don't use that language right now currently, that would have to be maybe specific ask within the context of this goal, and probably a discussion for the full task force.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Thea. And I'm glad you're reminding me of that. I think the next slide is actually going to show don't go there yet, Megan. The next slide is going to show some proposed legislation, but related to the reparations task force. But I don't believe it includes what you just mentioned, Thea. If you know that proposed bill number, that would be very valuable, because what we can do is look into that.
Right. I can find it. It was it did not pass. It was vetoed.
It was vetoed. Okay. So not from the current session, from last
that
session.
was last
got it.
session.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
Yeah. So that was vetoed, and there was not a similar bill introduced this session.
Okay, thank you. So we will go on to talk about bills that have been introduced to this session and are currently waiting on the governor's decision. So we'll talk about that in just a moment, but thank you for clarifying that. Lawrence, I'm wondering, before we move to that point, whether you have anything else you'd like to add to the conversation here in terms of connecting with a member of the reparations task force.
Nothing to add.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Appreciate it. So Megan, if you will, please click forward. There's a lot of text on this slide. I wanted to put this all here so that you could kind of glance through it. And thanks to Marisa for identifying these bills as kind of ongoing, the work of ongoing advocacy and an ongoing legislative platform that comes from the reparations task force. So these are all currently pending, all four of these, 2 bills in the Assembly, 2 bills in the Senate. They have passed the Senate and the Assembly, and the governor will have to make a decision to sign or veto by October 12th. So by our next task force meeting, there should have been a decision about whether these bills are signed into law. They all relate to the reparations task force's report in different ways, and I think that they might shape the way that this subcommittee or that the task force might want to frame the specific recommendations that are currently drafted that you reviewed for this meeting that we can talk about. So I'm going to share all 4, and I think briefly, just so that we all kind of understand what these different bills are proposing. And then I think if you'll keep them in your mind so that when we get to the language that was drafted based on your last conversation, there might be some ways to add nuance to that or to add detail to that based on the language in these bills. So AB Assembly Bill 57 would specify that 10% of the state's funding for state-administered home loan assistance programs must be reserved for descendants of formerly enslaved people. That's the language used. So I did go through today and try to be very specific with the language from these bills. AB 62 would create a claims process that would actually assist victims of racially motivated eminent domain in seeking the return of the taken property, other property of equal value, or financial compensation. So I see that as maybe very directly related to some of the ideas that this subcommittee discussed in its last meeting. SB 437 would fund California State University research. It's $6 million in funding to further the recommendations in the reparations report, and to build systems that would verify descent, so to verify this descendant of formerly enslaved, as well as then confirm eligibility for reparative claims. So that would actually create some of the research and then structures. So again, I think maybe directly related to the conversation that this subcommittee had. And then this last Senate bill here would establish a bureau for descendants of American slavery that would be in the state's civil rights department. So that then bureau would be where that eligibility verification decisions were formally made. That bureau was also assigned the development and implementation of a public education campaign, and there's some sort of specific pieces of that education called out in that proposed bill. And then administer future programs that are created from other legislative efforts. So I wanted to spell that all out for you here. And again, thanks to Marissa for making sure these were on our radar. I'm wondering if Lawrence or Theo, you have any immediate thoughts here, or if it's worth just kind of holding these in mind and getting to the text that you have developed and see whether there might be ways to further refine based on this. Go ahead, Thea.
Well, I just think because I don't know much about these bills, that they didn't come to CVFA for review. I think we should wait until we know if this is going to be signed or not, because there may be, I don't know if this report can refer to bills that were vetoed, as a part of our recommendations. So I think we should hold on, that we'll know by our task force meeting whether or not we can refer to these, particularly SB 518. I didn't know about this one, establishing a bureau, if that passes. But until that happens, I don't really know what else to say about it. Okay. And I can't comment on them. So
yes, understood.
Understood.
I think, thanks for that, Thea. I think you are, it's helpful to point out that once a decision about these bills is made, it will be much easier to decide where and how to reference them. So I think, Lawrence, I don't know if you have any thoughts here, but I think what staff can promise is that as part of our updates in October, we will make sure to notify the task force if any of these bills are signed, the outcomes of these bills, whether vetoed or passed. And that might then influence the language. Does that sound all right, Thea and Lawrence?
That sounds all right to me.
Okay. Thanks, Lawrence. And Thea, since you're the one who said that first, I think it's a yes.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
That's correct. You. Yes. Please proceed.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So these are going to be helpful context that we will follow. I think, oops, was that forward one?
No,
Megan?
sorry, I accidentally went
Oh,
back.
you're good. I was like, oh no, did I duplicate slides in the wrong place?
Sorry about that.
No problem. One more, when you're ready, please move forward. And we have one more context slide. We wanted to make sure before jumping into the language that we drafted based on your previous conversation, we again shared that engagement session input that this subcommittee had considered very briefly in your first meeting. And I believe that subcommittee members requested that we not lose track of these requests that had come from engagement sessions. So making sure there are kind of commitments or metrics and accountability, some way of determining those things built into this recommendation. And then some kind of way of mentioning cooperative and community ownership models for descendants of enslaved people. So just wanted to put those back there because I know the subcommittee mentioned not wanting to lose track of them. And then this is a new, it's not new. The letter was received, I think at the 1st of September, the very end of August. And this letter is from 50 organizations, and you all have access to that letter. It was sent around as part of the written communications to the task force. But I wanted to call out a specific passage of that letter that is related to the subcommittee. So that letter notes that there was an act passed in 2021, the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Rights Act. So I went and did a little bit of research into that. And what it does is it just specifies a process for solving issues of heirs property. So there is a process in place. But what this letter noted to you all, something to consider, is that although there's a process, there is still a need for research to understand. These are the things that were identified by that letter submitted to this task force. One, the extent of agricultural land in California that is held as heirs or real property, and two, the unique challenges heirs face in maintaining ownership and stewardship of fractured agricultural land. So wanted to make sure that this subcommittee, as you're considering the language that you've already drafted, that you had these pieces of community feedback in mind. Any questions or comments on this before we get into the specifics of your language? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, do you mind kind of walking me through this, what this is again?
Yeah, the engagement session input comes from Tessa. I think you had noted in our last meeting which engagement session these ideas came from. I believe it was one of the ones held in the Central Valley, perhaps in Bakersfield, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And so this was a conversation in Bakersfield where members of the community highlighted these needs. So that's that first piece of it, Lawrence.
Okay, yep,
The second piece is a letter that was signed by organizations working in ag, that was submitted to the task force as written comment, as public comment, and is in your compiled list of public comments submitted to the task force and was
okay.
noted. Yeah.
When was that? It was during one of our meetings, our quarterly
Mm.
meetings, or after?
This was submitted by email to the email address where
Okay.
members of the public can submit public comment.
Okay,
And it was submitted, I don't know, Tessa or Caleb, if anyone can kind of grab that date. I believe it was submitted on September 1st, if I'm not misremembering.
Yeah, that sounds right, Camille. They were all submitted within those couple days.
Thank you,
and then
Tessa.
where is it? It's on the website?
You can find it in the Google folder where all of the public comments are just being
Oh,
input
okay.
as they're received, Lawrence. Yeah.
Okay,
That is where you can find that letter.
okay. Okay, so thanks for explaining what they are, but what is the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Rights Act?
Yeah.
Can you rephrase it, or I know it's here, but it's not clicking.
It is, okay, so let me get myself so I can use the right word. So heirs property is an issue that is particularly prevalent among Black Americans. And it is related to when, I really hope I'm saying this correctly, Caleb and Tessa, if anyone, wants to maybe do a little bit of research right now and jump in, please do. But what happens when someone passes away, but there is no clear succession for that property, it's called heirs property. And that has led to various forms of conflict, but also various forms of land theft that are kind of exploitative ways in which Black families in particular who have lost land that their families owned. So
Okay.
heirs property is property that is inherited by multiple people as tenants in common, often without a clear plan for its use or disposition.
Okay.
So what this act does is it creates a clear process for resolving a situation where there is no clear process in determining rights to that land.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence, for asking that. And I hope what I've said is clear. It is honestly a very complicated issue. And if there are further questions, I think what we can always try to do is pull other resources to share. So let me know, Lawrence, if more questions arise. Did anyone else, Caleb or Tessa, anyone else want to say something more there or clarify there?
I think you described it, Camille. The one liner is specifically around without clear title or documented legal ownership. So I think that's kind of like the underlining, the kind of the root of the challenge that then sparks everything you just described.
Thanks for that, Tessa. I appreciate that. Okay. I think one reason why this heirs property is called up here is that Doria had mentioned it in our first subcommittee meeting as requiring very specific kinds of legal knowledge and advice, exactly for the reason you just said, Tessa, and ensuring that that kind of legal advice is funded by some of the recommendations the task force has put forward. So I think there is a connection there. If you will move forward to the next slide, Megan, that is one of the changes that we have already made to the draft report. So in addition to proposing a new goal, so that's the review draft text that's down here at the bottom, that's what we'll do at the end of this. But we also heard in the last subcommittee meeting a request to add to our existing goals a couple very specific notes that are particular to Black Californians. And so we did add for inclusion in the October draft a recommendation that says, acknowledge and address the specific needs of Black farmers in all technical assistance and capacity building programs during both the application and award periods. And we also added language that says, provide tailored technical and legal assistance to resolve heirs, land ownership, and succession issues. So those were two additions to our existing goals based on the conversation from the last subcommittee meeting. Are there any immediate thoughts there or questions, or does that feel like an appropriate addition to existing recommendations based on your last conversation?
I think that sounds fine. I don't know where that would be located. Who's providing that tailored technical assistance? Does that already exist at the state level? As far as I know, USDA is the only entity that has a program for this. But that doesn't mean that people are served in California. So are we recommending that a state agency do this? Funding be provided for local agencies to do this? I think this is a very specific legal, very like a lawyer, essentially. I'm not sure if that can be, this type of technical and legal assistance is available just from like a nonprofit organization. Maybe Leah could speak to that from FarmLink, but so I don't know if we can clarify that between Lawrence and I before the meeting, but we should discuss who does that and be more specific, I think, if we're going to put that in there.
That's helpful, Thea. So in some ways, I think right now where this is, and I know, Megan, I didn't ask you to pull up the draft, so you don't have to do this, but where this is right now, it is embedded within a longer list of what extra funding for technical assistance providers should achieve. So I think it is, and the way it's right now written in the report, Thea, it is contextualized as offered by other actors, by nonprofits, basically. So it sounds like, though, maybe you're wondering whether there is a more effective way to ensure that this legal support is provided.
Well, all I'm saying is that there's going to have to be some steps in order to that will need to take place before this would be available. So I'm not sure if the full task force should consider adding in those details in order to provide tailored technical legal assistance. Some things will have to have some new programs will have to be created, or will have to be assigned to a certain agency, or I don't know if we want to go into that level of detail at this
Mhm.
point in the report.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I'm wondering, given that that is probably not going to be answered today, to your point, what would be the right way to make sure that this is reviewed in October? Would it be right now we are planning a, totally clean October draft, but also a version of the October draft that calls out specific language for review or specific questions related to it, so task force members can follow along and see those remaining threads of conversation. I'm seeing what you're saying here, Thea, as like this point should be kind of noted as needing task force members to review, and if they have additional context, to provide it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Um, yes, but I also, like what Lawrence said earlier, that I don't think many people know what this really is. Or do we have enough time to really go into that, what it is in our full meeting? That's a question for staff, maybe. I don't know how much time we'll have to allot to all of the things that we have to discuss there.
Hmm.
I think that, yeah, maybe just a note that where would this be located? Any more specifics that we could add there? I don't really know what agency would be Department of Justice. I don't know what agency would be able to handle this type of thing, unless it was a grant program for lawyers to administer that technical assistance, to provide free legal assistance. That'd be great. Or some other type of tailored technical legal assistance, free of charge to certain people or low cost or something.
Hmm. Okay, that is helpful. And I think you're making me think of the USDA program that is designed to resolve heirs, land ownership, and succession issues is what that program funds. It's basically a loan so that people who are dealing with heirs property issues can take a loan to resolve any conflicts over
Right.
ownership. So yeah, I
Oh,
think what you're highlighting here is the need for a bit further refinement and what this really is calling for.
right. Maybe we
Okay.
could just call out that USDA program, like leveraging existing programs at USDA to further this for California, something like that, that would get more at the addressing like the barriers, the things that need to happen in order for this to be realized.
Okay, thanks for that, Thea. I think the let's review maybe also that goal to draft text now, because there might be a way in which we actually, maybe the appropriate move is not to tack this on to a goal, but just to make sure that the goal about this issue is really as robust as possible. And so it can call on those existing resources, or it can, at least reference them. So what if from here, what I'm thinking, let's take a look. And Lawrence, of course, if you had something else you wanted to say, feel free to interrupt me, or jump in here. But I think now let's look at that draft text, that has the kind of draft goal to language, and see whether there's a way to kind of shape some of what you were just addressing, Thea, within that goal. So I did not put all of that language on a slide because it's not right for a slide. So Megan, I believe you have that ready to share. Thank you very much. And I'm thinking, Thea and Lawrence, would it be helpful if we just took 5 minutes for you to kind of scan this again? And then if you have any immediate feedback on this, and then I have specific questions to ask you, but I'm kind of want to first get your thoughts. Would 5 minutes be helpful to refresh your memories?
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. So let's all review this for a few minutes and then we can jump in and get your thoughts. Maybe just one more minute. And I know, Thea, you'll have to leave before too long. So just want to make sure you have the time to share. Maybe one more minute here. Okay, so I'm wondering, Thea and Lawrence, whether you have any initial response to this draft text, whether it is reflective of the conversation that you had in your last subcommittee meeting, whether there are any changes that you'd like staff to make. Just your kind of immediate first response to this draft text.
Well, overall, I will say, Lawrence, unless you please go ahead if you want to make a comment here. Overall, I think it reflects what we talked about at our last meeting. Those 2.1 and 2.2 were definitely things we discussed and were brought up. 2.2 is brought up specifically at the Kern County engagement meeting that Doria discussed at the last meeting. And I think it looks okay to take to the full task force for discussion. I think my only small comment is on two things. First is 2.1 AI. I'm not sure why those two specific historical events are included. I mean, I understand eminent domain. I don't really understand, were there a lot of cases where land was made unusable due to impacts of infrastructure projects? I don't know. I don't understand the historical context there of why that specific example was used. If that could be clarified a little bit more. Maybe that is there's a lot of those examples. I'm just not knowledge. I don't have the understanding of those. Pardon my ignorance on that. And then also for B, I'm not sure why we wouldn't put that technical assistance for the heirs property in there. I mean, I don't know where it is in other places, but is that under 2.2B? It seems like those things maybe that could be combined. We have legal and technical assistance, cooperative and community land ownership under the first one, and then also the second one. So maybe that that could be tightened up a little bit.
That's very helpful, Thea. Thank you for that. Yeah, I do think the language we just looked at should be here. So we'll make sure that language is added. Your question about what is meant by this made unusable. So that was a relatively ineffective attempt of mine to be wider than the one instance which was shared, which was land that was flooded when a dam was built. So I think we can say that. I think it is actually quite a challenging way to both be flexible and because we don't have the full breadth of people's experiences, or there's always a balance there between being a little bit so flexible you just don't make any sense or you're not saying anything. So do you have any guidance there? Like, would it be better to just say land taken through eminent domain, or other actions such as the building of a dam that flooded farmers' fields? Or, should we just get more specific there maybe?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of examples. outright theft and displacement, the internment camps of Japanese Americans in California, tribal nations examples. There's a lot of history, but I don't know if we can't go, maybe we've gone into that in other parts of the report. But here, if there's a way to lean on anything in the reparations task force that outlined any of those types of examples, we could point to that, or anything in the heirs property, maybe that could be a footnote or reference to existing types of events. And I would, if Lawrence has anything to say on that as well. I just feel like those are maybe two examples, but I don't know how to best capture. I don't know that, because that would be also determining eligibility. I don't know if we can determine what is that within the context of our task force. That would require additional research staff program, which is written somewhere else down there. And so maybe that's further refinement for establishing eligible historical events for displacement or something like that.
Yeah, that's helpful, Thea. So maybe instead of saying eligible historical events include but are not limited to, rather noting the need to define what those eligible historical events are and should
Yes.
include, and leave it at that. Okay, that can be. Lawrence, what do you think about that? I'm feeling like that maybe is the level of, given that this task force does not have expert level knowledge in this area, that might be a good way to leave that flexibility open. Do you have any thoughts to any of these points, Lawrence?
No, I don't. I think that's fine.
Okay. It can update the language in the two ways we just discussed. So making sure that specific kind of assistance with heirs property is included in this list in 2.1b should be there. And then also finding a way of noting in that 2.1a that the need to determine what those eligible historical events are. Okay. Lawrence, go ahead. It looks like you're still unmuted. Did you have other comments or thoughts?
Yeah, I guess when we're talking about where it says enslaved individuals,
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were going to be specific about enslaved descendants of enslaved African Americans.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was trying to use the language that's used by the reparations report, but I do think we can refine it further. Are you asking that, Lawrence, just knowing that the history of enslavement is wider than African Americans, as you've brought up before? Is that where you're kind of the note you're making here?
No, I'm just wanted to be specific because, well, that is true, right? There was enslavement other than African Americans, but my understanding was that we were going to be specific to descendants of enslaved African Americans as one of one of the goals for the report.
I also understood that to be a goal. So what about this? What if when we talk with Dawn, we also just make sure that we understand what language the reparations task force used and how they were specific about what descendants of enslaved people means, and then we can update this language to be more specific in that way. Because I think Lawrence and Thea, I'm interested to hear if you agree what Lawrence just described was what the subcommittee had wanted to do. So I can make a promise to adjust this language to better reflect that desire.
I agree with Lawrence. Yes.
Okay, I will do some more research there and make sure that this language is representative of the specific history of enslavement of African Americans that this subcommittee wants to address, and adjust the language accordingly.
And I don't want to get stuck on words, but I don't understand the 2.1A. It talks about restorative land fund that is accessible to ancestors of enslaved individuals. Should that be descendants?
Yeah,
Because
I think it
ancestors
should.
have already passed away. Or wait,
Uh,
am I reading that wrong?
no, you're right. It should be changed to
Descendants.
descendants. Yeah. That's an error. That should be changed. Thank you for calling that. We'll make sure that language is consistent. Great. That's very helpful. Thank you for calling that out. And we will make sure that that phrase, descendants of enslaved Africans or African Americans, whatever it is that is the appropriate way to refer to this based on what the reparations task force did, will be very consistent that that is the phrase that gets used throughout this entire goal. Thank you for
Well,
pulling.
I had
Go ahead, Kate.
one other comment on 2.1B VI.
Hmm.
Oh no, IV. If I remember correctly, and again, Doria's not here today. We have half of our subcommittee here, so maybe this is a flag for the full committee to make sure we got this right. It was my understanding that we wanted to make sure that there was additional legal and technical assistance for those who might want to, in acquiring this land, might want to pursue like different types of business structures, like cooperatives or community land ownership. Did I remember that correctly? And I'm saying this because I don't, it from reading this now, it's like there should be legal and technical assistance available for everyone who's going through this process, not just those people who want to develop those types of business structures. And I know that we wanted to make sure that was called out specifically. Maybe I'm missing where the other piece that says we want to make sure that those types of TA and legal help are available for all.
That's helpful, Thea. I think, what if this language was changed to be legal and technical assistance for recipients of funding to develop appropriate, business and governance structures, including support for cooperative and community land ownership? Is that maybe a little more representative of the desire to make sure people have the resources they need to set up on the land, which I do think was part of the broader goal that this subcommittee discussed, and then just make sure that it's clear that that is inclusive of
those structures. I mean, at the end of the day, people are going to choose what type of agricultural activities they might want to do and what type of business structure, and a variety of business structures. But specifically, we've heard in the meeting in Kern County also was specifically about those types of entities. So keeping that language, but I think what you said is probably fine, as long as it isn't too jargony.
Okay.
Not
Let's
that
give it a
what you
try.
said just is I'm not saying what you just said is jargony.
No, I
Camille,
understand.
sorry. I meant like, as long as it's so clear what that we're not losing that piece.
Yeah, no, not at all, Thea. I'm laughing because it is so hard. As soon as it's so important to say it all. And sometimes the more you say, the easier it is to lose the piece that was important. But I think what I just said, and I'm sure, I think Caleb's note taking this time around, I'm sure it's captured in his notes, and we'll try that. And then of course, we need to, I think, go through this whole thing and find opportunities to make sure that it's not lost in a really long phrase or a really like jargon heavy phrase. So let's give it a try what you said, which is just expand out, say support should be there, but that support should specifically call out these kinds of structures as needing support.
Yeah. And I know that's important to Irene too, because of comments that she's made in the past. So make sure that community land ownership is also still remains in there.
Thank you. Thea, before you have to hop off, I have two kind of important questions. I know there's 4 minutes, but two important questions. Maybe we can
I
pick.
could stay till 4:05. That's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
9
I'll
minutes.
stay on a little bit later. It's okay.
One of them is Lawrence and Thea. This is tough to ask you both, but what would be an appropriate way? So, Megan, if you'll scroll up, if this is goal 2, if we move this into the October report as goal 2, and then of course flag it so the full task force sees that that has been made goal 2 and can respond to it. What would be the title of this goal? I know that the subcommittee is called Restorative Land, but I'm wondering, if you have a sense of what is this goal achieving, similar to what, goal 1 is tribal stewardship and land return. Goal 3 is preserved and thriving agricultural lands. Just wondering if you have a response to that, what feels representative of this goal. And if you can't answer that, I understand. So that's one question. And the second question that's very pressing is this subcommittee had mentioned the need to ensure that all funding that the task force is calling for allows for public-private partnerships and I will say I went into kind of down a rabbit hole and what that meant. And so I wanted to make sure that as staff, we are starting to work that into all of the recommendations. I understood what that meant. Did it mean ensure that philanthropy can contribute dollars to funds? Or did it mean ensure that if matching funds are required, that the recipients can use philanthropy as matching fund? So I guess I don't actually understand what that request was. So that's why it's another sort of pressing question to ask. Those are my two questions. Thea or Lawrence, do you have any immediate response?
No, but I'll think about a title. And the other thing, I don't know. It depends who asked the question, who made the request. I don't know what they meant.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure either. I think, Thea, if I'm remembering correctly, this was something that you and Doria had mentioned, the importance of ensuring that philanthropy could be part of whatever funding this task force is calling for. But I'm not sure what is that? What does that mean? And how can we phrase it correctly?
Sure. Well, we might have to think about how to phrase that. I
Okay.
also don't know about a title.
Okay.
Restorative Land Fund. I don't know. Maybe the whole task force should look at that. Because the rest of the task force hasn't read this yet, right? I mean, they haven't seen any of this, so they might have a good idea. My thought of the public-private partnerships and philanthropic dollars, where this comes in, where I've seen this come into play is when there are grant funds, and we're specifically, like, it could depend. It could be matching funds. It could be specific donations to cover certain types of land acquisition. I think this is very important because, the state, if it's a grant program, then we have to avoid the gift of public dollars. If we're recommending for restoring land or giving, private ownership of land, and then, there's a very fine line there. And with public philanthropic dollars, I mean, there's ways that state agencies have, covered certain upfront costs or made a revolving loan program or, covered certain acquisition costs, but not the actual acquisition, which might have to be funded by philanthropic dollars or external. There are some things that not all of this potentially could come from state dollars. And I think that is a question for both legal staff. I think that's something our Deputy Jameson for Climate, Virginia, she could maybe provide a review of that specific part, or anyone at GoBiz. And there's also a philanthropic arm of the governor's office that maybe could provide some input on appropriate wording. I don't know how to fit it into all these places where we've recommended, but I think it's an important thing to make clear that programs could have a method for that type of contribution.
It is very helpful. And I think the way you framed it as sort of filling in whatever gap might be there in terms of either statutory obligations or ways that programs are limited actually in what they can do and how. And so I see how some language would need to be sort of developed around that. Okay.
And some of the funds that we're recommending are existing programs that have their own requirements and limitations, and others are entirely new ones. So both could be possible, but the newer funds, you know, we could be more specific about allowing for that mechanism as a way to further contribute to the funds. And maybe provide some flexibility for covering certain costs that couldn't be covered under certain programs.
Right. So I'm almost thinking at its broadest level, it's something like incorporate or consider ways to work with philanthropic or private funds to I would have to get the language right, but it's basically like think about what your program can and cannot do and find ways to help applicants fill those gaps using philanthropic dollars. That's kind of what I'm hearing here, and then developing some language around that.
Yes, I think.
I'll do my best. It's not in this goal. It was mentioned as very important for this goal, but I did not know how to write that language because I didn't understand. I think I have a better sense of it now. What I'll say is I'll do my best to start this conversation. Like you mentioned, maybe Deputy Secretary Jameson is a good person to start with. And then if we can get it close, I'll include it in that October draft. And if not, it can be something that we can continue to discuss or develop. I want to confirm with Thea and Lawrence that you are comfortable including this as goal 2 in the October draft. And of course, then noting for task force members that this is something they should review because they have not seen it yet. Is that what you would like us to do as staff to get ready for October? With those changes as you've specified today.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Yes. Agree.
Great. Exciting. Okay, so staff will move this into the October draft as goal 2. And we will make sure to flag this language so that the full task force is aware of this change. I have more things to ask, but it is 4:05, and I'm wondering, Megan, if you would actually go back to the slides. Thea, of course, hop off when you can. And I'm guessing, Lawrence, some of these other things, if you'll skip forward, Megan. So I think we got some of these kind of these first 2 questions felt very pressing just to get October ready. And then these second 2 pieces here, I think that eligible for past land takings is something that we are already talked about, like how are we going to work on that? And so that's something staff can keep thinking about and maybe have some ideas for October. And the last thing I'm noting here is just that there was not any clear direction yet from the subcommittee about a recommendation related to supporting Black businesses as restitution for lost wealth. So right now there's land access, but no recommendation about business support. So I just wanted to note that I had not heard any clear recommendation from this subcommittee, and there's not a need for one. But if this subcommittee would like to continue thinking about that or has some other proposed language, what we can do is just hold on to that and make sure that that can be part of that October discussion if you decide. So just noting that. Thea, you probably have to hop. Any last comments before you head out?
No, I don't have any extra comments. I appreciate all the work that you put into combining everything that we talked about at our last meeting, and into something that I think is ready for the full task force to consider in October. So thanks for all of your work.
Thank you. Thanks, Thea, for
And I'm
reviewing.
saying you, the collective you, all of the SGC staff.
It's always collective.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
your time. Sorry that I have to jump off early.
Thank you, Thea. Lawrence, did you have anything to say here, or should we move to wrap up the meeting? What are you feeling?
I'm feeling we need to wrap up,
Okay.
but I did want to say, so when we talk about like black farm businesses,
Mm,
my opinion is that we need to be specific to, again, descendants of enslaved African Americans, because part of that is compliance with Prop 209, I would think.
that
And
is
it's
true.
specific, and the reparations already covered the legal, the legal, the compliance with the laws and regulations. So, my understanding is it's okay. It's not form of discrimination to identify a specific population that's been harmed
Thank you for that, Lawrence.
versus just general a black person.
Right, using race and ethnicity as a qualifying factor versus
Correct.
a very specific historic harm. Thank you for noting that, Lawrence. I think you've helped a lot today, just pointing out the need for very clear consistency in the language. So I've heard that here, and we'll make sure that we update it accordingly. As of now, though, this last point, there is nothing kind of specific to this in the recommendations. So I think that because the subcommittee hasn't had the chance to really think about that yet, we'll move the language as you advised us today. But otherwise, we are not going to be adding any new ideas to that. We'll just make the revisions that you specified, if that sounds right, Lawrence.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think we can, Megan, I'll pass it back to you just to wrap us up. Thank you, Lawrence.
You're welcome. And I was wondering if Caleb needs a bigger workspace.
Good being here, Lawrence.
He likes to
Looks
spread out.
comfortable.
Got a lot of papers.
We do have one member of the public joining us, so let's see if Yvonne, if you're interested to share public comment related to this conversation or to general task force business, go ahead and put your hand up and we'll know to unmute you. Doesn't look like it. Well, thank you for joining. I think that just about wraps it up. Camille did a summarization, and we have no more subcommittee meetings until, well, we don't have any more. So our next meeting is October 15th and 16th. That's the full task force meeting in Ventura with an option for virtual attendance. We've got a lot of work to do to prepare for that in the meantime. So Lawrence, hey, thank you so much for being here and all of your contributions and moving this language forward into goal 2 and the draft report. This is an exciting milestone. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate staff being here and other folks for tuning in with us today. And break halfway through the week. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye, Lawrence. Thanks. Thank you, Megan.